Welcome to Edexcel GCSE RS Revision, Unit 10.4. In Part 4 we will look at how Christians use the Sermon on the Mount as a guide for living. In Part 3 we learn that the Sermon on the Mount is a collection of the sayings of Jesus found in Matthew's Gospel, chapters 5 to 7. The Edexcel exam board identify 4 themes from the Sermon on the Mount, about which you could be asked to write in the exam. The first theme is Jesus' reinterpretation of the law of Moses, which we covered in video 3. In this video we will look at the 3 other themes. They are displaying religion, Christians and money, and judgment and the golden rule. Before we get on to those, a quick definition. Jesus uses the word hypocrite throughout the Sermon on the Mount, but what does it mean? The origin of the word hypocrite is connected with the role of an actor. An actor is a person who pretends to be something they are not. In the context of Jesus' teachings, a hypocrite is a person who pretends to be more virtuous or more religious than they really are in order to get public approval. So what does the Sermon on the Mount say about displaying religion? The phrase displaying religion is one of the key terms for this unit and simply means to demonstrate your religious faith in public. Jesus looks at 3 main examples of ways that a person might display their religion in public, and in each case condemns the hypocrites who make a big show of it for public approval. If you do these things publicly, you will not have any reward from your Father in heaven. Instead, Jesus instructs his followers to fulfill their religious duties in private. He says, make sure you do not perform your religious duties in public so that people will see what you do. The first issue that Jesus covers is giving to charity. Jesus says, when you give something to a needy person, do not make a big show of it as the hypocrites do. Instead, he says, give to charity in such a way that even your closest friend will not know about it. Jesus says the hypocrites make a big show so that people will praise them, but for his followers their aim should be to please God and not other people. He says, your Father in heaven who sees what you do in private will reward you. For Christians today, this could mean giving to charity in a way that others are not aware of it. For example, at Mass, many Christians give envelopes into the collection. As well as being more practical if they give on a regular basis, it also means that the amount of money they donate is not known to other people. The second issue is prayer. Jesus says, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites. They love to stand up and pray in the houses of worship and on the street corners so that everyone will see them. Again, Jesus is criticizing these people not for praying itself, but for praying in a way to get attention or approval from others. Yet again, Jesus turns it around and tells his followers, when you pray, go to your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, and your Father who sees what you do in private will reward you. For Christians today, this could mean not making a big show of praying in public. The third issue is fasting. Jesus points out that it was known for hypocrites to make a big show of the fact that they were fasting by neglecting their appearance so others would know what they were doing. Jesus says that instead his followers should make extra efforts to conceal the fact that they are fasting by washing their face and combing their hair. For Christians today who fast during Lent or on certain days, it can be tempting to moan about feeling hungry or missing eating certain things, but Jesus says Christians should make an effort not to complain at all and keep their fasting concealed from others. We move on now to what the Sermon on the Mount says about money. In chapter 6 verses 24 to 34, Jesus speaks on the theme of money. Firstly, we should point out that Jesus doesn't ever say money in itself is a bad thing. People often misquote the Apostle Paul when they say money is the root of all evil. In fact, Paul, following on from Jesus' teaching, says it is the love of money which is the root of all kinds of evil. So Jesus does not condemn money itself, but rather condemns those who would replace God with money. He says, no one can be a slave of 2 masters. He will hate one and love the other. You cannot serve both God and money. This links in with the first and second commandments, which say to worship God alone. Jesus warns against turning money into an idol and serving or worshipping the pursuit of money. Jesus says, do not store up treasure for yourselves here on earth, where moths and rust destroy. Jesus explains that material wealth is always temporary and can be easily lost. Therefore, it should not be the foundation upon which your life is built. Jesus tells his followers that they should instead store up treasure for yourselves in heaven. This phrase tells Christians that they should not live in pursuit of material gains, but should live to grow spiritually, since this will have consequences in the afterlife. Finally, Jesus gives some general advice about worrying. It is common for many people both today and at the time of Jesus to worry about money, but Jesus encourages his followers to trust in God for their needs. He says, so do not start worrying, where will my food come from? Your Father in heaven knows that you need all these things. Instead, be concerned above everything else with the kingdom of God and with what he requires of you. Jesus uses a couple of memorable analogies to make his point. He says, "Look how the wildflowers grow. They do not work or make clothes for themselves, but I tell you that not even King Solomon, with all his wealth, had clothes as beautiful as one of these flowers." Or to give another example, look at the birds. They do not sow seeds, gather a harvest and put it in barns, yet your Father in heaven takes care of them. Aren't you worth much more than birds? Finally, the theme of judgment and the golden rule. Towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives a summary of the law of Moses and the teachings of the prophets when he says, "Do for others what you want them to do for you," Matthew 7 verse 12. This verse, which has become known as the Golden Rule, is an excellent basis for all people to follow, not just Christians. In fact, there is evidence to suggest that this idea of treating others how you would want to be treated can be found in the teachings of almost every major religion. The idea is so simple that it doesn't really require any further explanation. However, Jesus does use it as an example to explore the issue of judgment. Jesus says, "Do not judge others, so that God will not judge you, for God will judge you in the same way as you judge others." This is an extension of the Golden Rule and encourages Christians that if they want God to be kind and forgiving in his judgment of them, then they must be kind and forgiving in their judgment of others. Christians have not always had a good reputation for being non-judgmental, but this principle fits in with other things that Jesus says. For example, in the story of the woman caught in adultery, Jesus silences the priest by saying, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." A good example of this principle not to judge was in 2013 when Pope Francis was asked about the issue of homosexuality, and he said, "If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" Jesus develops this teaching with a very short parable. He says, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will be able to see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." Jesus makes the point that Christians should look at their own lives first and realise their own problems before considering putting themselves in a position to judge others. Thanks for watching. I've been Mr. McMillan. That's the end of part 4. Please remember to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, follow me on Twitter and download the podcast.